Mr. Schaffner. Okay. Okay, it is 7 o'clock. I'd like to open up our regular board meeting with Fairfield Union Schools here on February 3rd. I'd like to stand, everyone to stand, please, to pledge to the American flag, and then followed by a moment of silent reflection.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Just wanted to make a public announcement before we get into a community announcement, before we get into our regular business board meeting. I think it's worthy of this community announcement that I want to make. Marjorie Rolls is going to be turning 100 this coming Thursday, February 6th. So if anyone has an interest or you want to pass it on, just send her a card. I know she'd appreciate it. I looked it up in the Pleasantville Panther alumni book. That she was a Pleasantville graduate, and she graduated in 1943. Marjorie Mertz was her maiden name, and then she married in 1944 her husband, Mr. Robert Rolls, Bob Rolls, who was one of our 5 founding board members. So wanted to pass that community announcement along and then just one other announcement that I'm not going to look that direction. We have a board member that has a birthday.
Mr. Kimmer, do you have her address by chance?
I do not right. I will. I
If you
have
can
it.
Send it to me.
Okay.
Appreciate
I
it.
will send that on, and so that possibly could be passed on. So, okay. Okay. With that, we'll move on to 1.4, then the roll call, and I'll turn to Mrs. Roberts, please.
Mrs. Conrad Zingmeister. Here. Mr. Hoffman.
Here.
Mrs. Johns. Here. Mr. Kimmer.
Here.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Here.
Okay. Thanks, Mrs. Roberts. All board members are present. 1.5, the minutes, the January 13th organizational minutes. All board members have had an opportunity and a chance to look those over. If there's no questions, thoughts, concerns, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. President.
Okay, been moved by Mr. Hoffman. Would there be a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Smeltzer. Mrs. Roberts, you call the roll, please.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zingmeister.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns. Yes. Mr. Kimmer.
Yes. Motion passed unanimously. 1.6, the January 13th regular meeting. Board members also had an opportunity to look those over, and if there's no questions, thoughts, or concerns, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes as well.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Johns. Would there be a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zingmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. All right, that moves us into 1.7, which is the adjustments to the agenda. Turn to Mr. Belleville. Do you have any adjustments, sir?
Yes, sir. Add new business item 5.14, substitute teacher list. Just forgot to add that on when set the agenda on Friday, so would recommend we add that as a new item 5.14.
Okay. At the end of the new business section, or?
Yes, sir.
Yes, gotcha. Okay. Thank you. I'll turn to Mrs. Roberts if you would have any adjustments, please.
Yeah, if we can remove item 5.4 in new business, number 16 under 5.4,
Okay.
just to discuss at a later time.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Roberts. All board members, if you would, at this time, just strike number 16. Okay. No other adjustments. I would entertain a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Smeltzer. I'll second that. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zingmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed unanimously. Doesn't move us into information discussion, and that will move us into our superintendent updates. Turn to Mr. Belleville, sir.
Good evening. Happy birthday, Mr. Hoffman. If Beth is watching, I've done my due diligence. So, On the board agenda, just touch on a couple of topics real quick. First, want to call out the resignations for purpose of retirement, Cindy Landis and Elsie Sullivan. They couldn't be with us this evening, but we will celebrate both of those individuals the last work day for staff, as we've started that tradition the past few years. Ms. Landis, longtime elementary school teacher, currently serving as the art teacher at Bremen and Pleasantville, and has just been a blessing to a lot of our kids over the years in the classroom. Being in charge of your own classroom is one thing, but whenever she made that transition to art and literally touches every kid, both buildings, that's a powerful position. She's just done an incredible job. And then what can you say about Elsie? I mean, 50-plus years service to Fairfield Union Local Schools, just an institution in and of herself, and we hate that she's at that point where she's ready to call it a career, but we certainly appreciate her years of service and dedication to the district. And like I said, last day of school there, we'll celebrate both those individuals and hopefully do it right for them. So very excited about this for them on a personal level. Going to be hard to replace them, but excited that they're both at that point. Also, as you say goodbye to some, you say hello to others, and you keep pushing forward. So we're glad to have Ms. Baskin with us this evening, and certainly welcome her to the team. And when we get to that spot on the agenda, I'm sure Ms. Roberts will have some words she'd like to share, and Ms. Baskin, we want to hear from you as well. But obviously, been a long-standing Falcon, and so it's glad to bring you home and get you away from Lancaster City Schools. So we're happy about that. Anytime that I can pull one from Mr. Hale and be able to rub it in his face later, I'm awful excited. So we're happy to have her join in the staff here, and have a few leaves of absence on the agenda, and certainly hate bringing those forward because, as the board well knows, that's generally an indication of a medical issue or something along those lines. So we do have a few leaves of absence, and just ask that you keep those staff members in thoughts and prayers, and we'll continue to be there for them and support them as they need us. And as we go through the agenda, if there are any other questions as we get to certain items, I can certainly talk more about them at those points if anyone has questions. I want to point out to the board just a couple of committee appointments that I'll be serving on that will pull me out of the district a little bit. Locally, Judge Vandervoort is working in conjunction with Jobs and Family Services, Child Protective Services, the ESC, all the county schools. We're really trying to revamp how we approach truancy. As part of that, we've kind of been a little bit of a leader on a front with a product called Aubrey. Aubrey is a data information system that helps us collect information from all the places where we collect data, from grades to attendance to just any sort of discipline, whether it's positive or negative discipline situation, positive behavior incident. And as we work through the truancy process, if we get to a point where we have to go to the judge with a case, one of the difficult pieces is knowing that we're doing everything we can to try to address whatever is the root cause of the truancy. So the judge has requested of the schools to provide as much information as possible on students, and we Fairfield Union had first looked at Aubrey last year to help us collect that information to take to the judge. We kind of presented that to other school districts in the ESC as we were looking at truancy and how can we collect this data and get information to the judge so she can do her job in trying to help truancy as well. The ESC and schools were looking at a variety of topics. I told them about our experiences with Aubrey and that we had looked at this product. Long story short, I think most of the schools in the county are now signing on with Aubrey. Dr. Ward has, through the courts and Jobs and Family Services, also secured some funding to help pay for the product in year one. So myself, Superintendent Hale at Lancaster City Schools, and Superintendent Dr. Edwards at Amanda Clear Creek have been asked to serve on a truancy committee, truancy council here in Fairfield County, where we can kind of shape this thing and how we want it to flow. We've hired a case manager that will work directly with families and also in conjunction with our truancy officer. So I did accept that request to serve on that council and help kind of steer this process. On a state level, was selected to serve on the BASA Legislative Committee, shared with staff in the January monthly memo that there is going to be a very active legislative session here in the spring. It's a budget year, so there's a lot of legislation out there that whether it can stand on its own or gets tagged onto the budget bill, we expect there to be a lot of activity that will directly impact public education. And so not only being able to advocate for public education, but also giving Fairfield Union a voice in that process and a seat at the table. I thought it was important to take advantage of that appointment. And so I'll be serving on those two council/committees and serving in that capacity. I don't think it'll pull me away too much, but just wanted to kind of put it on the radar that there might be some meetings outside of the district, and I'll make sure I communicate that with board members and as well as our administrators so that they'll know where I'm at.
Okay.
Bremen Traffic Study had a meeting today with Kleinger's. We are moving forward with that traffic study around Bremen Elementary School. I've been in contact with Mayor Taylor as well as the Bremen Village Council, and we hope here in the next couple of weeks to have cameras up around the elementary school. Mm-hmm. They'll record traffic flow and patterns, I believe over a 3-week period. That's kind of what they're thinking right now. And then sit back and examine all of that and come up with potential solutions to see if there's a way to ease the traffic flow around Bremen Elementary School. So we'll continue to investigate that and work on it. And then also had a meeting with the Board of Elections today. They would like to further investigate potentially using the schools as polling places moving forward. I told them we've already approved the school calendar for next year. Also talked to them about a couple of legislative pieces that might impact the hours that students serve in a school year that we would need to look at. If our schools became polling places, I do feel it would be in the best interest to not have school on those days. I've worked in a couple of districts where the school was open and it was also a polling place, and it's not a good situation. A lot of traffic in and out of the school, and just don't think that that's the safest play. I did ask them, if possible, that we not do this for the 25-26 school year, since we've already adopted that calendar, that we look more November of 26 and the 26-27 school year to make that kind of move. However, if they were in a position where they had no other option and they needed our assistance, that we would start digging into it and see what we might be able to adjust in the calendar and then bring that back to the board for consideration. So it's a good conversation with them today. We want to be good partners with them, and very exploratory at this point, but did want to bring it back to the board's attention. We talked about this about a year ago, if I'm not mistaken, and they came back around last week. They called me last week and asked if they could meet and come out and talk to me. So we had those discussions today. So we'll keep board members updated as we progress through.
And they're looking at moving both villages or three villages or?
The main conversation today was the polling place at here in Rushville at the fire department.
Okay.
However, I told them if we move that polling place to a school, whether it be the high school or the middle school, and bring it to this campus, if I'm gonna have to close one building, I just assume close all the buildings, and we can make all of our schools available. And I think that there's an interest from their side to have Pleasantville Elementary, Bremen Elementary as polling places as well. There is a push both in the state of Ohio and on the federal level to make Election Day a national holiday. And the Board of Elections, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they would be heavily in favor of that, because more than anything, I think it would give them the opportunity to recruit some poll workers. They struggle every year finding people to work the polls, and if schools are closed, those are potential people that could work polls for them, whether it's teachers or aides or whatever. So I think there is an interest there from the Board of Elections, but it's something to watch. As of right now, we were specifically talking about the fire department polling location in Rushville, but I do think there is an interest on their part to move all of the polling to the schools.
Okay.
Any other
Okay.
questions?
Good question, Mr. Hoffman,
Thank you.
appreciate it, and the response, Mr. Belleville. Yep, with that item and all the other items in the superintendent update. Okay, that does move us on then, recognition of visitors. I don't think anyone's signed in. Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. Does move us then into the consent agenda section, workshop and conferences. As you can see, we have multiple workshops and conferences down through there, 1 through 14. And any thoughts from you, Mr. Bellwell, to workshop and conferences, and then I'll turn to Mrs. Roberts.
Most of these are annual conferences that we attend every year. It's honestly that time of year when you come out of winter, heading into spring. There are going to be a lot of conferences as we actually are prepping for the start of next school year. But also with a lot of our programs, we're getting into quote-unquote competition season, whether it's ag or DECA, those type of things. So the spring is always a busy time for conferences. So this is pretty normal this time of year to have a high volume of requests.
Okay. Mrs. Roberts, I see some of your staff as well.
Yes, that's correct. We have similar thing. This is an actual annual conference that we've attended in the past. This is for Power School for our e-finance system. It's something that basically we run all of the financials, all of payroll through. It's a really good conference. It brings a lot of districts together, and there's different sessions, like different pathways you can attend depending on what role you play. So it's a really good conference. I will draw attention to number 1. I know we have Ms. Baskin in there. Due to timing, it was interesting just because the conference, while it's not until March, we have to sign up for the conference before that. So we didn't want to wait until the next board meeting to put that in there. So we have a little caveat and some parentheses in there. Just we kind of went back and forth on how to handle that, but felt that still wanted to go ahead and get that approved, pending the recommendation for employment this evening. The one thing I will call out is that it's kind of a conference. It's a 3-day conference. Each of us will be going to 2 of the 3 days, just depending on the roles of the conference. So.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Roberts, thanks for your comments and yours as well, Mr. Belleville. Any questions, comments for Mrs. Roberts, Mr. Belleville? All right, if not, move on then to financial items, and I'll turn to Mrs. Roberts again, please.
Sure, just 2 things this evening. The first is a donation of $1,000 from Rick Burns for the National Honor Society Christmas shopping trip. So obviously that's a great trip and a great thing that the National Honor Society does. So very, very thankful for that donation. The other thing that I wanted to go through this evening is our food service report. This is through the month of December. So even though we just ended January, we'll present that at a later date. But overall, what I really wanted to call attention to in this report is when I went back and compared it to last year and month for month, all of our numbers are indicating we're about 1 month ahead as far as our total lunches served, our total meals served. When I look at January of last year, we had served about 100,000 meals. So this is as of the end of December. So we were already making up for that. So really excited to see that, excited to see our community really taking advantage of free breakfast, free lunch, and kind of looking through, you know, just kind of where we are. It was interesting to see that it's almost dead on, to be honest, of really that 1 month ahead of things. Also, if we go down and look at our rebates, which is about 2/3 of the way down, under food and paper expenses, exact same thing there. We've had $56,000 in rebates so far this year. Last January, we had about 52,000. So another indicator, we're pretty much 1 month ahead. Overall, our food service fund is at $156,000. The one thing I want to draw attention to that I probably will be coming to next board meeting, and this was as anticipated, is that I will have to bring a recommendation, more than likely, to transfer some funds from our general fund into food service. We knew this was probably going to be a case. We estimated about $300,000 a year based on all the free breakfast and free lunch. So we are now hitting that point. We did have a cooler that needed repaired, that is eating through some of those expenses pretty quickly. So just kind of anticipating that. I am waiting, I'm purposely waiting until, you know, we kind of see where some of that lands, but I would anticipate next board meeting to come with probably not the full 300,000, but maybe a portion of that, just to kind of kick that off. But again, that was something we planned, that was something we anticipated within this first year, and going from there. So overall, feeling good about the overall food service and our community taking advantage. Obviously, there's some back-end numbers that we anticipated that are executing pretty much how we expected. But feel really good that, you know, we're a month ahead of some of these numbers. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that students are taking advantage of that. One other thing, it's not listed here tonight, but just to note, obviously with it being the 3rd at the beginning of the month, we just closed the month of January this morning. So all the financial and insurance reports will be presented next board meeting. So just to call that out, just based on timing of when the month closed.
Okay.
Any questions?
Okay. Thoughts, questions from Mrs. Roberts?
No question on that, but it just made me think, you said a cooler was replaced?
The parts of the cooler, not like I'm not going to say the right technical terms, not like the body of
Like
the
the
cooler,
housing,
but
okay.
The motor.
Sure, I was gonna say, it has a technical name to it, but yes, and it was quite expensive.
I guess hearing that kind of sends alarms in my head. What other items in that kitchen might we need to be thinking about replacement? Any ovens or anything like that I assume that's on our radar with the big picture?
It is, so we
Okay.
worked with Diana, part of her review that she has to do, a procurement review, part of that is saying, okay, what are your funds that you currently have, and what is your future of items like that that you need? So Diana Browning and I did work, oh gosh, it was in the fall, early fall that we finished this, to go through and really look at the age of some of those items and to say, okay, what do we anticipate? And not even just of what do we anticipate from what could need repaired. It's kind of the same story we talked about with the buildings,
Right.
of what needs repaired. It's the same kind of thought process. But we also have had questions that if we continue these higher numbers of meals, what are maybe some new equipment that we don't currently have, but that the team has realized, hey, if we had, you know, more pizza pans, would that help us? So things like that we've really worked through. So we are anticipating it. This cooler was not one, I'll be honest, that we anticipated. Matt Smith did look at if we just repair it, what it would cost versus if we completely replace the entire unit. And it was actually more cost efficient and made more sense to really just replace the whole thing at this point with the age of it. So yes, so to answer your question, we have looked at that, and Diana did a really good job of kind of going through each of the kitchens and saying, you know, what are we anticipating over the next few years?
It seems odd that we'd have to ask that question this early, but yet appliances just don't seem to last as long as they used to, so.
And we're seeing, it seems like, maybe it's just me, but it seems like Matt has been doing a lot of work in the kitchen. So whether it's dishwashers or, this was the walk-in, like, completely died. So it was big.
The good news is we didn't lose any food out of it or anything, because we knew quick enough that they were able to move the food to other kitchens. So that was, we didn't lose any of that, so that was really good.
And when we did to that point, when we did the energy conservation project, we had alarms installed on all of our refrigerator and freezer walk-ins and those type of things, all of our waters, pumps and all those type of things. If there are leaks, if there are failures of any type, Matt gets warnings on his phone, so we got the warning pretty quick that the freezer had stopped functioning, and they worked with Diana and transferred all the food over to the middle school walk-in, and so
Those warning systems are worth their weight in gold.
yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
You answered my question. I had some thought when you didn't realize about the alarms, that I thought maybe Mr. Smith just come over and needed work at lunchtime, just at lunchtime. Just kidding, but, okay. Thanks, Mrs. Roper. I do want to follow up with the comment that you mentioned with the donations of $1,000 of Rick Burns to the National Honor Society Christmas shopping trip. Mr. Rick Burns is so looked up to of this Fairfield Union School District, and for him to donate to such a worthy cause, hats off to Mr. Rick Burns. As many of this district, so appreciate and admire, look up to him. So, yeah, just wanted to have that note. Okay, that does move us into 4.3, then approve the consent agenda. I entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister. Would there be a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Hoffman. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed unanimously. That does move us into new business section, and it'll move us into the resignation of Mrs. Cindy Landis, our elementary art teacher, and Mr. Belleville's commented some on that in regard, and board members have seen her resignation letter that's in front of you, and it was very heartfelt and touching, how she served our district and how thankful we are to her. So, if any other thoughts or comments, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Johns. I will second that. Mrs. Roberts, you call the roll, please.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Does move us into 5.2 then, was the resignation of Mrs. Elsie Sullivan, our librarian, effective January 23rd, 2025. I think I had seen in her resignation letter 54 years of service. I don't know of anyone that's served the school district as long as Mrs. Elsie Sullivan and what she's given to this district. So, so thankful for her and her years of service. So with that being said, if there's no other comments, I would entertain a motion to approve the resignation. Okay, been moved by Mr. Smeltzer. Would there be a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes. Motion passed unanimously. Does move us into 5.3, the support service contract. Be a motion for Mrs. Heather Baskins as Assistant Treasurer, payroll salary, Scheduled F, Step 13, beginning February 13th, pending verification of all applications material. And I'll turn to Mrs. Roberts.
So we are very, very excited to bring this to the board this evening. When we opened this position, we purposely did it over the holidays, and we kind of, we left here and said, you know what, maybe there's some people out there who are thinking, hey, it's the new year, I have some new goals, let's just get this out there and get a feel for, who's interested in this position. And we were so excited that we had 16 applicants. So that was something that we were really, really excited, and a lot of very qualified applicants. Heather's name was one that definitely stood out to us, and that we were really excited to talk with her. And I will say that was something that her interview was very different than the others. it was one of those, the second, we knew her qualifications. We knew her qualifications and we knew her background. And we really wanted to talk with her and say, okay, what are you looking for in your next role? What are you looking for? And make sure that all around it was a really good fit for everybody, for us, for the team, for the district, for her and her family. And then also, one of the things that stood out is just her ability to work with others and how she can kind of navigate through some of the situations. As payroll, you know, you're working with somebody's livelihood. You're working with their take home. You're working with their insurance. And sometimes there's conversations that are not always easy, and you have to kind of, you know, navigate through and figure out and hope at the end of the day we're really trying to help our employees and our staff. And that's one that I think just Heather's demeanor and kind of her just kind of level, just how she can talk to somebody, I think is really going to be an asset. So we're really excited, as Mr. Belleville mentioned, you know, obviously comes from Fairfield Union, has a daughter still in the district at the middle school. So really, really excited to bring her on and have her, you know, her skill set that she already has, and then expand that for the payroll piece of it. So excited for those next few steps.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts, for the wonderful comments, and I'll turn to Mrs. Baskins. And any comments from you, Mrs. Baskins?
I
Please.
just want to say thank you to Courtney for the opportunity and hopefully for the support from the board. But as Mr. Belleville said, I am a lifelong Falcon. My husband's a Falcon, my children are Falcons, so it's just really exciting to be back here.
Okay. Well, wonderful to have you, and thank you for your words. Okay. No other thoughts, comments? Let's entertain a motion to approve Mrs. Heather Baskins, our assistant treasurer and payroll salary.
So moved.
Been moved by Mr. Hoffman. Would there be a second? I'll second that. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zingmeister.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Welcome.
Even childhood neighbors.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. All right. Yes, thank you. It's not disrespectful. As we move into our business meeting, if you would like to leave the board meeting, it will not be disrespectful, Mrs. Baskins. If you'd like to stay, you're so welcome, but it's not disrespectful. If you would want to leave at any time, and you would be welcome to leave, okay? Okay. Yes. Yes. Or Mrs. Nolan or Mrs. Hahn, if that would be your ask. Apologize. All right. That does move us into 5.4 then, and which is personal service contracts. You'll see there's numerous 1 through 15 then of personal contracts, service contracts. So I would entertain, unless there's any thoughts, questions with those, with that, with 1 through 15, as anyone sees. Mr. Belva, any thoughts with the spring? Okay.
It's a great group of
Okay.
coaches coming back. We have a couple of first-year people, Ellie Dill,
Okay.
who is a first-year teacher with us and just doing an incredible job in 8th grade ELA. She's going to step in and help with middle school girls track. Kelsey Turkowski has held that position in the past, but she is due any time now with her baby, so she's not going to be able to do track this year. And we have Ellie Patterson helping with middle school softball. Right now, Ellie's doing a long-term sub position with us and was a player here and just a great addition. Great person, really good family. So we're excited to have Ellie involved with the softball program as well. So the rest of them are all returning coaches who have just done a great job over the years. So we're excited to have him back.
Okay. Thank you for the comments, Mr. Belville. Any thoughts, questions, concerns to address? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Been moved by Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister. Would there be a second? Second by Mrs. Johns. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Motion passed, unanimous. All right, does move us on then to 5.5, volunteers. As you can see, there is a list of 9 volunteers. Any thoughts, Mr. Belville, with those volunteers?
I would just always want to point out and thank volunteers for all that they do. You know, they pay to coach. It's kind of misleading to call them volunteers because it costs them money to do it. So all of them have been with us before and have just done incredible work. So we're thankful that they're willing to come back and do it again.
Okay. Okay. No thoughts, questions, or concerns. I'll entertain a motion to approve the volunteers as presented. Been moved by Mr. Smeltzer. I'll second that. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimous. All right, moves us on to 5.6, a leave of absence for Holly Culver, beginning January 31st through the February 28th. As you can see, there is a attachment is that as well, so no thoughts or comments. I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Johns. Would there be a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimous. Moves on to 5.7, leave of absence. Do have a motion on the floor for Jeff Dixon beginning March 5th through the end of the 2024-2025 school year. There's no comments, questions. Mr. Belville, sir.
Deputy Dixon is
Yes, sir.
hoping to be back before the end of the school year. but,
Okay.
We made the request through the end of the school year just in case he is unable.
Okay.
The coverage I know you said something about the coverage, is that for the rest of the?
For as long as Deputy Dixon is out, we have shifted our school security officers around. We want to make sure that we have school security officers at the elementary schools full-time where they're, out from the main campus here. Deputy Fiesel is stationed generally primarily at the high school. In the absence of Deputy Dixon, I'm going to call him Deputy Rary. Dean Rary is still auxiliary with the Sheriff's Department. He's still on the SWAT team. So in the mornings after the buses start rolling in, he has been going over to the middle school to walk halls, make sure things are up and running and going. He's doing spot checks throughout the day, and then rolling over towards the end of the day to get kids on the buses and get them rolling. So very appreciative of Dean and all he does for this district. And so he is pitching in to help cover and help Anna here on the main campus. So we've deployed guys to the perimeter at the elementary schools, and then Anna and Dean are holding the fort down here on the main campus.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the information and for the questions as well, Mr. Smeltzer. So I'd entertain a motion for the absence of Mr. Jeff Dixon then.
So moved.
Been moved by Mr. Hoffman. Would there be a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Smeltzer. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes. Motion passed unanimous. All right, moves us on to 5.8, in which is a leave of absence for Peggy Elder, beginning January 24th, 2025, through the end of the 2024-2025 school year. Any no additional comments at this time, so I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, been moved by Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister. I'll second that. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mrs. Johns,
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimous. Does move us on to 5.9, educational trip by, to approve for Mrs. Julie Verdal and Mr. Bart Smith, and to take the Rushville Middle School Students Council to a Student Leadership Day at the Nationwide Arena on February 6th. Mr. Belleville?
Appreciate this, kind of unique. I don't know that we've done this particular trip too many times, but Ms. Verdal and Mr. Smith have really taken a hold of that student council and tried to elevate it and have them be more active in what they do and how they do it in the building. So I think this will be a very memorable trip for them, a good experience, and love that those two individuals are really trying to foster those leadership skills in the kids at an early age, and so I think it's going to be an exciting adventure.
What
Okay.
was this at the National Arena, Nationwide Arena?
Uh,
What are they going to?
They'll go up, and the Columbus Blue Jackets are putting on the day, so they'll
That's
be
Okay.
kind of the front office staff of the Blue Jackets will be doing leadership activities with the kids. Then I believe they get to stick around and catch a game afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister. Mr. Belleville, thank you for the comments.
No more thoughts, questions? I'd entertain, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
The move by Mrs. Johns, would there be a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hoffman. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Johns.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer,
Yes.
Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed unanimous. It does move us on into 5.10, which is an educational trip, with Mrs. Jennifer McCook-Spillers, take the FCCLA members to the regional competition in Zanesville, March 15, 2025. Mr. Belleville?
Just a regular trip for the competition. We do it every year.
Okay. Thoughts, questions? If not, entertain a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
A move by Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister, I'll second that. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Conrad Zangmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mrs. Johns. Yes. Mr. Smelter.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimous. Does move us on to 5.11, an educational trip for Mr. Chris Turner to take the FFA students on educational trips that's been presented. You can see the list of those items in front of you: agricultural diagnostics, state tractors troubleshooting, state officer information session, state competition for mechanic skills, state competition for outdoor power, and state convention at the High State Fairgrounds.
We've always had a strong ag program. I mean, really strong. We all knew that. But I would like to kind of acknowledge a tip of the cap, however you want to phrase it, with Mr. Baker's leadership and Mr. Turner coming on board and Ms. Penrose. Those three individuals really are just clicking. They make a great team. They work well together. They complement each other really well. Their skill sets really complement each other well. And they are doing a tremendous job. It's really exciting to see what's happening. I was at a ball game over break, and a couple of the officers approached me and wanted to take me out to the greenhouse to show me what they've been working on. And went out in the greenhouse, and cucumbers as long as your arm, and tomatoes and plants and peppers and all it. I mean, the greenhouse is just, there's stuff growing out the windows. There's so much in there. And so they're extremely active and working very, very hard. So really proud of that team, and watching them come together. It's really been inspiring, and so we're just proud of all three of them and the work they're doing right now, and their kids. It's great to see.
Mr. Belleville, do you think there can be somewhere in the future that we could have a field trip where we could.
Absolutely. Anytime you wanna go, we can go over, as your schedule permits, we can get you in, without a doubt.
Would love to.
Yep.
Love to see that, that greenhouse, that would be wonderful if we could have.
Yep,
field trip
absolutely.
sometime, and,
I think we have a board meeting, well, I know in May we'll be at the high school for the state of schools and board meeting. But before then, anytime during the day, if you're free, stop by and we can get you in. Or after school, just let me know.
Okay.
We'll arrange it.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll be impressed.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. And so agree with you with your comments with Mr. Baker, Ms. Penrose, and Mr. Turner, very, very proud of them as well.
Ag uses the one right outside the ag door, and then
Yep.
is it Science that uses the other one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Are they using it?
They are. I think there's a healthy competition at this point. That science is a little jealous of what they're seeing in the ag, so we're seeing an uptick all the way around. But it's just little stuff. Like the other day, I saw Miss Browning walking out of the kitchen holding a handful of cucumbers and that had come out of the greenhouse that she was taking to put into some salads in the cafeterias. So it's neat seeing that involvement and watching. It's good stuff.
Sounds wonderful. Okay, I'll entertain the motion then to approve the educational trip with Mr. Chris Turner.
So moved.
Okay, then moved by Mr. Snodgrass, would it be a second? Second by Mr. Hoffman. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll call, please?
Mr. Smelter?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zainmeister?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns? Yes. Mr. Kimmer?
Yes, motion passed unanimous. Okay, that does move us on to 5.12, to approve Mrs. Hannah Penrose to an FFA student, and to the FFA students to tour the OSU campus on February 27th. Mr. Bell, any comments?
Again, just everything we just echoed.
Okay.
They're
Okay.
really working hard.
Are
All
they
right.
meeting with the ag team out there?
I think so. I believe so. They're taking a whole tour of,
Department?
they're taking a whole tour of their facilities and see what they do and how they do it. And I think they also might be trying to squeeze in an OSU hockey game while they're up there.
That's on
I was gonna say, if you look on, don't mean to, not saying this smirky or anything, but if you look on they've got it listed on.
Oh, the attachment?
Yeah,
The
the
attachment?
attachment,
Yeah,
yeah, of who they're meeting with and stuff, so.
My bad. I
okay.
didn't read it.
No, appreciate it. Appreciate the question and the comment, so. Okay, I entertain the motion to approve then, Ms. Hannah Penrose.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Mrs. Conrad Zainmeister, would there be a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Johns. Mrs. Roberts, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Conrad Zainmeister?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns? Yes. Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes,
Mr. Smelter?
Yes.
motion passed unanimous. Has moved us on into 5.13, and to approve Miss Crystal Sweck to take the DECA students to the 2025 Ohio Career Development Conference on March 11th, March 12th in Columbus.
This is a normal trip.
Normal trip, thank you, Mr. Belleville. No thoughts, questions? Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Hoffman, I'll second that, and come to Mrs. Roberts for the roll, please.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer?
Yes.
Mrs. Conrad Zainmeister?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns? Yes. Mr. Smelter?
Yes.
Okay, motion passed unanimous. That does lead us into,
5.14.
thank you. How you wrote it down. 5.14, there was an addition to the adjustment, through,
Substitute teacher list.
substitute teacher list, okay. Yeah, substitute teacher list. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Conrad Zainmeister, would there be a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Smelter. Mrs. Roberts, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Conrad Zainmeister?
Yes.
Mr. Smelter?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mrs. Johns? Yes. Mr. Kimmer?
Yes. Motion passed unanimous.
Mr. Kimmer, one,
Yes,
before
sir.
we
Yes,
go
sir.
further, meant to have this in my updates and forgot, so just a quick comment.
Okay.
Thursday evening, our girls' basketball team is at home, and we will be having a ring ceremony to recognize and honor our state boys cross-country championship team. Coach Myers and the team were able to design their own championship rings, and they have arrived. So a big thank you to Kirk Thompson, Herf Jones for putting a rush on that order. The rings are absolutely stunning. An incredible design. I can share that Kirk Thompson purchased one for himself that he can take to other schools to use as a sample of this is what you can do, because they're that pretty. So it's going to be a great night Thursday night. I think JV game starts at 6 o'clock. I believe they're going to recognize the cross-country team before the varsity game. We have a couple things going on that night, senior night, some things like that. So they're going to be recognizing people at different points of the evening. So Thursday evening, if you're free, it's going to be a great evening to recognize that team and acknowledge all of their accomplishments.
Okay.
I want to make sure I got that.
Okay, thank you for,
Glad you said that, because I thought it was gonna be the boys' game.
It was originally going to be Saturday at the boys' game, and Coach Myers had requested that we move it to Thursday night, so that it got moved at Coach Myers' request. So we'll do that Thursday night at the girls' game, and really kind of fitting its senior night for the girls there, I believe, as well. So hopefully, quick score update. We are up 32-15 at half, so hopefully we're still undefeated Thursday night and be ready to close out a great regular season for the girls and acknowledge the boys that night. So it should be just an incredible night all the way around.
okay. Thank you for adding that comment. Remember it, Mr. Belville, and thank you, Mr. Smelter, helping me as well with that, because I thought it was the boys as well. So, yeah.
Can you shoot us a text or time, start time?
Absolutely.
Presentation and that
I
sort
will.
of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. With that, then, it does move us into executive session, adjournment into executive session. In accordance with section 121.22 of the Ohio Revised Code. Entertain motion.
So moved.
So, for moved by Mrs. Conrad Daniels, I will second that. Mrs. Roberts, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Conrad Dingmeister.
Yes.
Mr. Kimmer.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mrs. Johns. Yes. Mr. Smeltzer.
Yes.
Motion passed at, I think, 7:55. Yes.